When we talk about tithing, it's easy to focus on the monetary aspect, the 10% we are called to give from our earnings. But this focus on money alone often misses the true power of tithing, which lies in its ability to address something far deeper, the condition of our hearts. Tithing is much more than just a financial transaction. It is a reflection of where our hearts truly lie and who we are trusting to meet our needs. In fact, when we look at tithing through the lens of the heart, it becomes clear that God's primary concern is not how much we give, but the state of our faith and trust in Him. God does not need our money. He doesn't need anything from us in that way. The Bible reminds us that He is the creator of all things. He owns the cattle on 1,000 hills, Psalm 50:10. Everything belongs to Him. So why does God ask us to tithe? Why is this a command in Scripture? And why does it have such a profound impact on our faith? It's not because God needs our money. It's because He desires our hearts. Tithing is a way for us to demonstrate that we trust Him fully, not just with our resources, but with our lives. When we give, we are making a statement that we believe God is our provider. The act of tithing requires us to step out in faith, especially when it doesn't always make sense in the natural. It's easy to give when there's more than enough, but what about when money is tight? What about when you're faced with financial challenges or uncertainties? That's when tithing truly tests the condition of your heart. Are you still willing to trust God even when it seems like there might not be enough? This is where tithing becomes so much more than just a financial practice. It becomes an opportunity to grow in your trust in God's faithfulness. Many people struggle with the idea of giving because they see it purely through a transactional lens. They think, if I give this, what will I get in return? While it's true that God promises to bless those who give, it's essential to understand that the motivation behind tithing should never be purely self-serving. The focus should never be on what you stand to gain, but on the posture of your heart. When we tithe with the right heart, we align ourselves with God's purposes, and in doing so, we open ourselves up to receiving more than we could ever imagine. Jesus teaches us in Matthew 6:21 that where our treasure is, there our hearts will be also. This means that the way we handle our money directly reflects where our priorities lie. If we are holding tightly to our finances, if we are unwilling to release control over them, it reveals a deeper issue. We are trusting in our own ability to provide for ourselves rather than trusting in God to meet our needs. The act of tithing is a way for us to surrender control and say, God, I trust you with everything that I have. It's an outward sign of an inward transformation. The heart of tithing is rooted in love and faith. It is a way of expressing gratitude to God for all that He has done for us. Tithing reminds us that everything we have is a gift from Him. In the book of Deuteronomy, God reminds His people to remember Him as the source of all their blessings. Remember the Lord your God, for it is He who gives you the ability to produce wealth. Deuteronomy 8, verse 18. When we tithe, we acknowledge that we are merely stewards of the resources God has entrusted to us. It's a humble act of recognizing that all we have comes from His hand. Furthermore, tithing is not just a reflection of our trust in God, it's also an act of worship. When we give, we are saying, God, you are worthy of my trust. You are worthy of my offering. You are worthy of my praise. Tithing is an acknowledgement that God is not just the creator, but the sustainer of our lives. He is the one who gives us breath in our lungs and strength for each new day. It is an expression of thanksgiving for His provision and faithfulness. The Bible speaks often of the connection between our hearts and our giving. In Corinthians 9:7, Paul tells us that God loves a cheerful giver. This verse points to the importance of attitude in giving. It's not about the amount we give, it's about the heart behind the gift. Are we giving out of obligation, or are we giving out of love? Are we giving because we feel compelled, Or are we giving because we want to honor God with our lives and resources? True tithing begins when we shift our focus from the transaction itself to the transformation that takes place within us. It's not just about parting with a portion of our income. It's about aligning our hearts with God's purposes. When we tithe, we are declaring that God is our number one priority. And this declaration doesn't just affect our finances, it affects every area of our lives. It changes the way we think about money, the way we use our time, and the way we treat others. It changes the way we see our work, our relationships, and our purpose in this world. As we grow in our faith, our understanding of tithing evolves. We come to realize that tithing is not a burdensome command, but a privilege. It is an opportunity to demonstrate our trust in God, to grow in our love for Him, and to participate in His work on earth. When we understand tithing in this way, it becomes a powerful tool for spiritual growth. It becomes an invitation to experience a deeper connection with God and to step into a life of abundance that He has promised to those who trust in Him. Ultimately, tithing is about our relationship with God. It's a spiritual discipline that helps us cultivate a heart that is fully surrendered to Him. And as we learn to give, we also learn to trust, to grow, and to experience the transformative power of God's faithfulness in our lives. In the Bible, one of the most important principles that God outlines for us is the concept of first fruits. The principle of first fruits refers to the practice of giving God the first and best portion of what we have, whether that is our time, our talents, or our financial resources. The idea is simple yet profound. God deserves our best, not just what is left over after we have taken care of everything else. It is a principle that transcends the Old and New Testaments, deeply rooted in Scripture and integral to our understanding of how to honor God with our lives. In the book of Leviticus, God instructs the Israelites to bring the first fruits of their harvest to Him. The first of the first fruits of your land you shall bring into the house of the Lord your God. Leviticus 23:10, this was not just a token gesture, but a command that required the people to trust that God would continue to provide. At a time when agriculture was the primary means of survival, bringing the first of the crops to God required faith. They didn't wait to see if the harvest was plentiful or if there was enough left over after their needs were met. They gave the first and trusted God to provide the rest. This act of giving the first fruits was an expression of faith, showing God that they believed He was the source of all their provision and that they trusted Him to supply their needs for the future. When we apply this principle to our own lives today, it challenges us to give God the first of everything we have, not just in terms of finances, but in every area of our lives. It's easy to become so caught up in the demands of everyday life that we give God whatever is left after we have taken care of everything else. But the principle of first fruits calls us to do the opposite. It calls us to prioritize God above everything else. It's about recognizing that everything we have, everything we've been blessed with, comes from God, and therefore He deserves the first portion. The first fruits principle is not just about money, though money is an essential aspect of it. When we give God the first portion of our income, we are saying, God, I acknowledge You as my provider. I am trusting You with what I have, and I believe that You will take care of all my needs. But this principle also extends to our time and talents. Do we give God our best time? Are we willing to set aside the first part of our day to seek Him in prayer and worship, or do we allow other things to take priority? Are we willing to use our skills and abilities to serve Him first, or do we reserve those for our personal gain or convenience? When we put God first in these areas, it has a profound impact on our relationship with Him. It draws us closer to His heart because we are demonstrating our trust in His faithfulness. Giving God the first fruits is an act of surrender. It says, God, You are first in my life, and I trust that You will meet all my needs. I am choosing to honor you with the best of what I have. And it's important to note that the first fruits were always the best portion, the first and finest part of the harvest. In our lives, this means we don't just give God the leftover time, energy, or resources. We give Him the best part, the first part, because He deserves nothing less. The principle of first fruits is also deeply connected to our faith. It requires us to step out in trust, especially when we don't know what the future holds. It's easy to give after we've seen what we have, after we're sure that we have enough to meet all our needs. But the first fruits demand faith. When we give the first portion before we know what's coming, we are saying, God, I believe that you are faithful, and I trust that you will provide for me in ways I can't yet see. This is where the power of the principle lies. It is a tangible expression of trust in God's ability to provide, even when things look uncertain. In Malachi 3:10, God challenges His people to bring the whole tithe into the storehouse and promises to open the floodgates of heaven and pour out blessings they cannot contain. This is a promise linked to the principle of first fruits. When we prioritize God with our first, He promises to bless the rest. Just like the Israelites brought their first fruits to God, trusting that He would provide the rest of the harvest, we too are invited to step out in faith and trust that God will take care of us as we honor Him with our best. When we give God the first portion, whether it's our money, our time, or our talents, we're also positioning ourselves to receive His blessing in a way that we could never do if we waited until everything was in order. The order of giving matters. If we give God the first portion, it sanctifies the rest. It sets the tone for everything that follows. It's like planting a seed in good soil. It produces a harvest that is much greater than we could have imagined. In the same way, when we give God the first, we open the door for Him to bless the rest of our lives, our finances, our relationships, and our future. The principle of first fruits also teaches us a deeper level of gratitude. When we give the first to God, we are acknowledging that everything we have is a gift from Him. We are reminded that we are not self-sufficient, that our ability to produce and provide comes from Him. It's a humbling experience to give God the first because it reminds us of His greatness and our dependence on Him. It's an act of worship, a way of expressing our gratitude for His provision and our faith in His ongoing faithfulness. Ultimately, the principle of first fruits is about honoring God with the best of what we have. It's about acknowledging that He is worthy of our best, not just our leftovers. When we give God the first portion, we are putting Him in His rightful place as the center of our lives, trusting Him to provide for us and blessing us in ways we could never imagine. It is an invitation to live a life of faith, trust, and worship, where we continually prioritize God above all else, knowing that He will take care of the rest. When we think about tithing, we often focus on the discipline of giving, but what we might not realize is that it is also a key that unlocks the door to blessings and favor in our lives. Tithing isn't just about fulfilling an obligation, it is an act of faith that invites God's provision and favor to flow abundantly into our lives. This biblical principle goes beyond simply giving money. It positions us to receive more than we could ever imagine, opening the gates of heaven to pour out blessings we cannot contain. The Bible is clear about the connection between tithing and blessings. In Malachi 3:10, God says, "Bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house. Test me in this, says the Lord Almighty, and see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that you will not have room enough for it." This passage highlights a powerful truth. When we bring our tithe to God, we are not just fulfilling a command, but we are opening ourselves to receive divine blessings. Tithing isn't just about giving. It is about positioning ourselves to be blessed in ways we could never have imagined. God's promise to us when we tithe is not just limited to material wealth. While it is often interpreted that tithing results in financial blessings, it goes beyond the physical realm. The blessings that God promises when we tithe extend to every area of our lives, our relationships, our health, our peace of mind, and our spiritual growth. When we give faithfully, we are inviting God's favor into all aspects of our life, not just our bank account. These blessings are holistic and far-reaching, affecting everything we touch, because we are honoring God first with what we have. In practical terms, tithing opens up the flow of divine favor in ways that we cannot anticipate. For example, when we tithe, we may find that we are able to manage our finances better, or that unexpected sources of income begin to open up. Opportunities that seemed out of reach before may suddenly become available. Doors that were closed may swing open, and what once seemed like impossible situations may suddenly turn in our favor. The favor of God doesn't always come in the form of a paycheck or a promotion, but it can show up in many different ways. Sometimes it's in the form of peace in the midst of chaos, the restoration of relationships, or the ability to overcome challenges that seemed insurmountable. Tithing is an act of faith, and faith is the key that unlocks God's promises. When we tithe, we are choosing to trust God above our circumstances. It is easy to rely on our own understanding of finances and try to control everything ourselves, but tithing is an act of surrender. We are saying, God, I trust you to take care of me. I trust that your provision will always be greater than anything I could manage on my own. This step of faith activates God's promise to bless us abundantly as He sees that we are trusting Him above our own resources. One of the key aspects of God's blessings through tithing is the sense of security it brings. When we trust God with our finances, it shifts our focus from the world's standards of security to the eternal, unshakable security found in God alone. We may still face challenges, but we know that we are not facing them alone. God has promised to never leave us or forsake us, and He will supply all our needs according to His riches in glory. Philippians 4:19. Tithing is an outward sign of an inward trust in God's faithfulness, and that trust brings peace. As we step out in faith and give, we can rest in the assurance that God is looking out for us and will provide for us in ways we may not even see coming. The favor that comes with tithing is not always immediate, nor is it always in the form that we expect. Often God's timing is different from our own. But the key is that we are building a relationship of trust with Him through our giving. It's not about transactional giving, I'll give this and expect that, but about honoring God, knowing that He is faithful. Over time, as we consistently honor God with our tithes, we begin to see the blessings unfold in our lives. These blessings are often greater than just the material. They are about experiencing God's presence, His provision, and His peace in ways that we could never have imagined. Additionally, tithing has the power to break the spirit of fear and anxiety that often accompanies financial struggles. Many people live with constant worry about money, whether there will be enough, whether they will be able to make ends meet. But when we honor God with our tithes, we break the power of fear over our finances. We are choosing faith over fear, trust over anxiety. When we give to God, we are telling Him, I believe you are bigger than my financial struggles. I believe that you are in control, and I trust you to provide for me. This act of surrendering our financial concerns to God opens the door for His peace to reign in our hearts and minds, replacing fear with faith. It's important to remember that tithing isn't just about what we receive, but about what God is doing in us through the act of giving. When we tithe, we are aligning ourselves with God's purposes. We are partnering with Him in His kingdom work, and this partnership results in blessings that extend far beyond our immediate needs. As we give, we are also sowing seeds for future harvests. Our tithes not only bless us in the present, but they also lay the foundation for future breakthroughs and favor. In summary, tithing opens the door for blessings and favor by aligning our hearts with God's purposes and positioning us to receive His provision. It is a powerful act of faith that trusts God to provide. And as we honor Him with the first fruits of our labor, we unlock the promise of abundance in every area of our lives. God's blessings come in many forms: financial, relational, spiritual, but they all serve to draw us closer to Him, strengthen our faith, and remind us of His faithfulness. Tithing is not just about the act of giving, it's about stepping into the abundant life that God has promised to those who trust and honor Him. Tithing is not just a financial practice, it is a powerful spiritual discipline that plays a critical role in strengthening our faith and trust in God. At its core, tithing is an act of surrender, a declaration that we trust God with our resources, our future, and everything we hold dear. When we give a portion of our income to God, we are putting our faith into action, acknowledging that He is the provider of all we have. It's an outward reflection of an inward trust that deepens our relationship with Him and strengthens our belief in His ability to meet our needs. At the heart of tithing lies a spiritual truth. It is about trusting God in the areas where we often feel most vulnerable. Finances are a big part of our lives, and many people's peace and sense of security are tied to their financial situation. When we choose to give away a portion of what we have, it can feel like a risk. We might wonder, what if there's not enough left? What if I can't pay my bills? What if I don't have enough to meet my needs? These questions expose the heart of the matter. Tithing challenges us to confront our fears and anxieties about money and place our trust in God instead of relying solely on our own understanding or ability to provide. When we tithe, we are saying to God, I trust You to meet my needs even when the numbers don't seem to add up. I trust that You will take care of me even when circumstances are difficult. This act of faith, this choice to give even when it feels uncomfortable, deepens our relationship with God. It shifts our focus from the material to the spiritual, from our own efforts to God's provision. It is a constant reminder that our security and our provision are not ultimately dependent on our jobs, our income, or our ability to manage resources. Our security is found in the faithful God who promises to never leave us or forsake us. The process of tithing also reveals our heart's priorities. And in Matthew 6:21, Jesus says, "For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." Our finances often reveal what we truly value. If we are unwilling to let go of our money, it may indicate that our trust and security are placed in wealth or material possessions rather than in God. But when we choose to tithe, we are demonstrating that God is the priority in our lives above all else. We are saying, I value my relationship with You, God, more than I value the things I can accumulate here on earth. This intentional act of giving creates a shift in our hearts, moving us from a place of self-reliance to one of complete dependence on God. One of the most powerful aspects of tithing is its ability to break the grip of materialism. In our consumer-driven culture, it is so easy to fall into the trap of accumulating more things, more money, more success. We live in a world that often tells us that happiness and security are found in what we have. But when we tithe, we are choosing a different path. We are choosing to release our hold on material possessions and instead trust in the eternal blessings that come from God. This act of letting go of material things is a profound expression of faith. It forces us to confront the idols in our lives and to replace them with a deeper, more trusting relationship with God. In doing so, we experience a freedom that comes from knowing that our worth and our security are not determined by what we possess, but by who we are in Christ. The process of tithing also strengthens our ability to hear from God. When we trust Him with our finances, we are positioning ourselves to be more attuned to His voice. Giving regularly and faithfully helps to cultivate a spirit of obedience and receptivity to the Holy Spirit. Tithing requires discipline, and through this discipline, we learn to follow God's lead more closely in all areas of our lives. As we surrender our finances to God, we become more open to His guidance in how we manage the rest of our lives. The more we give, the more we are reminded of God's faithfulness, and the more our faith grows. This process of trusting God with our money becomes a training ground for trusting Him with every other area of our lives, our relationships, our work, and our future. Another way tithing strengthens our faith is by teaching us to rely on God's timing. There are times when giving seems difficult or inconvenient, especially when we face financial uncertainty. We may question if it's the right time to give, if it will leave us with enough to meet our needs. But God has promised that when we put Him first, He will take care of us. In Luke 6:38, Jesus says, "Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over, will be poured into your lap." When we tithe, we are trusting that God will provide for us in His perfect timing. We are choosing to believe that He will supply all of our needs, even when we can't see how it will happen. This trust in God's provision builds our faith and deepens our understanding that He is not just interested in meeting our immediate needs, but in developing a lasting relationship with us that stretches and strengthens over time. Through tithing, we also gain a deeper understanding of God's generosity toward us. He is the ultimate giver, and when we give, we are reflecting His nature. God doesn't just give us what we need, He gives abundantly. The Bible speaks of God's provision as more than enough, overflowing, abundant, and limitless. When we tithe, we tap into that same abundance. We are partnering with God in His kingdom work and becoming conduits of His blessings to others. As we give, we become more like Christ, who gave His very life for us. The more we tithe, the more we are conformed to His image, learning to be generous not only with our resources, but with our time, love, and talents. Finally, tithing strengthens our faith because it brings us into alignment with God's will. Tithing is not just about the exchange of money. It is a way of participating in God's greater purpose. When we give, we are investing in His kingdom and His work here on earth. We are trusting that our resources are being used to further the gospel, help those in need, and make an eternal impact. Tithing helps us shift our focus from the temporary to the eternal, and in doing so, our faith becomes rooted in the unshakable foundation of God's promises. It reminds us that ultimately everything we have belongs to Him, and our role is to steward it wisely and generously. This understanding deepens our trust in God's provision and His ability to use our offerings for His purposes, building a stronger faith in the process. As we continue to trust God with our finances and give faithfully, we are transformed, our faith grows, our relationship with God deepens, and we become more like Him. Tithing is a tool that God uses to strengthen our trust in Him, reminding us that He is faithful to provide and teaching us to rely on Him in every area of our lives. Through this act of faith, we experience His provision, His peace, and His abundant blessings in ways we could never have imagined. Poverty is often seen as a lack of material wealth, but it is much more than that. Poverty is a mindset, a spirit that can take root in the heart, affecting not only our finances, but our entire outlook on life. It's a spirit that says there will never be enough, I'll always struggle, or I can't afford to give. The spirit of poverty operates through fear, insecurity, and lack, and it tries to convince us that no matter what we do, we'll never have enough. But tithing has the power to break this spirit of poverty and replace it with a spirit of abundance and faith in God's provision. The principle of tithing is one of the most powerful ways to break free from the mindset of scarcity. When we choose to give the first 10% of our income to God, we are making a statement that we do not live under the influence of the spirit of poverty. We are declaring that our security and provision do not come from the world's systems, but from God Himself. In Malachi 3:10, God challenges us to bring the whole tithe into the storehouse. And He promises that when we do, He will open the windows of heaven and pour out blessings that we cannot contain. This is a promise of abundance, not scarcity. When we tithe, we are taking God at His word, trusting that He will provide for us in ways that are beyond what we can comprehend. The spirit of poverty often thrives on fear. Fear of not having enough, fear of losing what we have, and fear of scarcity. This fear can keep us trapped in a cycle of lack, preventing us from experiencing the fullness of God's blessings. But when we tithe, we are stepping out of that cycle of fear and into the realm of faith. Tithing requires us to trust God in a way that challenges the fear-based mentality of poverty. When we give, we are acknowledging that God is our provider, not our job, our bank account, or the economy. We are saying, God, I trust You with my finances. I know that even if I can't see how it's going to work out, You are faithful to meet my needs. This act of faith breaks the grip of fear and sets us on the path toward abundance. Another way tithing breaks the spirit of poverty is by helping us reframe our perspective on money. Money in itself is not evil, but the love of money is the root of all evil. 1 Timothy 6:10, when we tithe, we are choosing to put money in its proper place. We are not worshiping our finances or allowing them to define our worth or security. Instead, we are acknowledging that God is the source of all that we have. Tithing helps us keep our priorities straight. When we give to God first, we are saying that He is more important than anything we could buy or accumulate. It shifts our focus from acquiring more material possessions to stewarding what God has already given us. This perspective helps us avoid the trap of greed and consumerism, which are often the tools of the spirit of poverty. Rather than hoarding what we have in fear of running out, we learn to trust God to provide and to give generously. In the same way, tithing teaches us to live within our means. When we give God the first portion, we are forced to make decisions about how we manage the rest of our resources. It forces us to prioritize, to make sure that we are living according to a budget, and to be good stewards of the money God has entrusted to us. This practice helps to prevent us from falling into financial bondage where we are constantly living beyond our means or trying to keep up with the world's standards of success. Tithing helps us live within our means, teaching us the value of contentment and financial discipline. By honoring God first, we align our finances with His will and break free from the patterns of debt, lack, and financial stress that often accompany the spirit of poverty. Tithing also brings us into alignment with God's abundant provision. One of the most powerful aspects of tithing is the way it connects us with the abundance of God's kingdom. God's economy operates on principles of abundance, not scarcity. When we give, we are participating in the flow of God's blessings, which are limitless and overflowing. The spirit of poverty tells us that there is never enough, that we are always struggling, and that we must hold tightly to what we have. But the spirit of abundance, which comes through tithing, tells us that there is more than enough in God's kingdom. He owns everything, and as His children, we have access to His resources. When we tithe, we are acknowledging that our supply comes from Him and not from our own efforts or the systems of this world. This shift in thinking is vital for breaking the grip of poverty as it replaces fear with faith and scarcity with abundance. One of the most profound effects of tithing is the way it builds our confidence in God's faithfulness. The spirit of poverty thrives on doubt and insecurity, constantly whispering that we won't have enough. But when we give, we are taking a step of faith that says, I trust You, God, to provide for me. I trust that Your promises are true, and I know You will meet my needs. Over time, as we continue to tithe and see God's provision, our confidence in His faithfulness grows. We begin to realize that God is not limited by our circumstances or by what we see around us. He is the God of abundance, and He will always provide for His children. This growing confidence in God's ability to provide breaks the spirit of poverty by replacing doubt with trust and fear with peace. Furthermore, tithing opens the door for God to multiply our resources. Jesus demonstrated the power of multiplication when He fed the 5,000 with just 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. In the same way, when we give God the first portion of our resources, He has the ability to multiply what we give. The spirit of poverty tells us that we can't afford to give, that we'll never have enough. But God's economy tells us that when we give, He will multiply what we have, often in ways that we don't expect. As we tithe, God can take the little we have and turn it into more than enough. This truth challenges the mindset of lack and invites us into the abundance of God's provision. Tithing also encourages generosity, which is another antidote to the spirit of poverty. Generosity is the opposite of scarcity. It is the mindset that says there is always enough to give. When we tithe, we are practicing generosity, and this sets the stage for a lifestyle of giving. As we become generous with our finances, we begin to see the world differently. We stop focusing on what we don't have and start focusing on what we can give. This shift in mindset is incredibly powerful. It breaks the cycle of selfishness, fear, and greed that the spirit of poverty fosters. It also opens our hearts to receive God's blessings, knowing that as we give, we will receive in abundance. Through tithing, we are declaring that we are no longer bound by the spirit of poverty. We are no longer slaves to fear, lack, or scarcity. We are stepping into a life of abundance where we trust in God's provision and experience the fullness of His blessings. Tithing shifts our focus from what we lack to what we have, and it breaks the chains of financial struggle, replacing them with the freedom and peace that come from knowing God will always provide. In conclusion, tithing is far more than just a financial practice. It is a powerful spiritual tool that can transform every aspect of our lives. Through tithing, we unlock blessings, favor, and provision from God that far exceed what we could ever imagine. It strengthens our faith and trust in Him, positioning us to receive His abundant blessings in every area of life, spiritual, emotional, relational, and financial. Tithing helps break the spirit of poverty by shifting our mindset from scarcity to abundance, from fear to faith. As we faithfully give, we partner with God in His kingdom work, and in return, He promises to meet all of our needs abundantly and without measure. In embracing tithing, we are not simply fulfilling a requirement, but actively participating in God's divine plan for our lives. It is an act of worship, a declaration of trust, and a testament to His faithfulness. As we honor God with the first fruits of what He has given us, we open the door for His favor to flow into every area of our lives, empowering us to live in the freedom of His provision and abundance. Let us remember that when we give, we are not just sowing into our finances, but into our future, our growth, and our relationship with God. The act of tithing changes us. It builds our trust in God's goodness, strengthens our relationship with Him, and sets us on a path toward His endless blessings.